Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. I'm Gene Paranek. Today's episode 79. 79 weeks we've been doing this. It's so good to be with you and to talk about what's happening in our community and also, as always, to talk about the news in the world of COVID. Here's our agenda for today, Friday, October 15th, 2021. COVID Connect, as usual, we'll talk about the CDC data from the state of Michigan like we always do. After that, my guest today, Ben Ernst from Ann Arbor Spark. He'll be talking with us about Michigan STEM Forward, which I think at first glance, maybe it's like, well, oh, this is like an early stage education thing. No, this is a really, really cool program that actually is connecting basically ready to work interns to companies. And it's a really, really neat thing. So we'll be talking about that. After that, Q&A and check-ins, as always, available. But before we get to the main event of the day, COVID metrics and vaccine distribution, like we always talk about from covid.cdc.gov. Of course, the CDC's publication that they put out for every state, every week on the latest metrics. If you happen to be listening to this either today live or on YouTube later, and you say, well, I'm not from Michigan, you can go to the CDC's website and you can find pages and pages of current data on your state that we'll be sharing here today from the state of Michigan. And the first bits, though, are national, so they look the same in any of these reports. Community transmission by county. This has been a sea of red for the last number of weeks or months. In what looks like, from a national standpoint, this big second dip, at least since August of 2020, so that would make it the third dip of the pandemic. But just huge amounts of community transmission all the way across the country. The good news, though, this graphic that we show every week, the amount of dark red is fading in this, corresponding with what you're hearing on the news, that the current wave appears to be subsiding. The way we've been tracking that and noticing that has been on this hospitalization graphic. And if you look at the bottom right corner of that used to be a wash in red. And in fact, there was another color of red in there between that pink color and that dark red color. That color has now disappeared. There's only one dark red state left. And that is actually really, really good news. So although you see a lot of dark red counties, we're certainly at a national level seeing that start to subside. And of course, we'll mention here that number 20 beds per 100. Why is that color dark red? Well, from the times we've had clinicians and hospital staff on the show, they're quick to remind us that a hospital has to run approximately 80% full to stay profitable. That leaves about 20 beds for overflow. So if they're running what they need to run just to function as a hospital, there's about 20 beds per 100 left. That's why that number is so important and so critical. In terms of vaccinations, nothing like the peak in March, April, but it's actually been crawling up a little bit. Little fluctuations, but crawling up a bit. We hover somewhere just under 1 million daily doses of the various vaccines. And to the state of Michigan, still awash in red. We had never seen levels of red like this until this current Delta wave. But now for the last, I think it's been 3 or 4 weeks, there's no variation to this graphic. It's simply a sea of red. Every now and then a county will pop out to orange or yellow. For the state of Michigan, obviously, we're down in the trough of another wave. So while the country may be coming up, the state certainly hasn't yet. And cases do continue to climb. Of course, testing along with it. That's always a balance between the number of tests administered and the number of cases that you actually see, because this doesn't represent every true case. It's only as many tests as you can get out there. And tests fluctuate from day to day, week to week. There, the test rate climbing up. Not quite to the levels that we've seen previously. Notably, the positivity has sort of flatlined. So when that starts to drop, that'll certainly be good news, but hovering just under 10% positivity. Thankfully, the deaths have not reached levels anywhere near where they were before, but they do continue to climb and they lag. So I think we need to be ready to see that this number will continue to slowly grow, although between natural immunity and vaccination, sure seems like there's not the same rate of growth in the deaths, which we can be thankful for, while still extending our hearts and our sympathies to those who are suffering from the disease. In terms of hospitalizations in the state of Michigan, after those last two peaks, also very nice not to see the same growth rate of hospitalizations, still under half of where we were for either of those two prior peaks. So a slow growth rate there. Maybe not as pronounced, a little bit more even distribution between the 18 through 39-year-olds, the 40 through 69-year-olds, and the 70-plus-year-olds. In previous waves, we saw the first wave carried by the oldest among us. They certainly had the highest numbers at the peak. That's that next wave among the 40 through 69-year-olds. And now it's just kind of relatively evenly distributed with a slight edge toward that 40 through 69 demographic. And this graphic that we have shared, starting to be very, very interesting, although at first couldn't make much from it. On the very front page of the CDC's report, they started putting this graphic, I want to say it was about 6 months ago, to track the level of vaccination per county versus the cases per 100,000. So if the vaccines are working really well to prevent transmission, let's be really, really clear, the vaccines are doing a great job of preventing severe hospitalizations and deaths. But if they were working to prevent transmission, we should see those nice aqua and turquoise colors up in the top, especially that top left. Sadly, that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing a growing amount of that dark purple color, which indicates a high level of vaccination and a high level of transmission. And so this has actually jumped dramatically from last week. If we had the graphic from last week up against this is one of the few changes that we see in the data that now the amount of dark purple has actually jumped dramatically in the state of Michigan. So not great news, certainly not what folks had hoped for, that that prior infection or vaccination would just stop transmission. But again, not to mistake that for efficacy in the sense of preventing severe hospitalizations and deaths. So interesting data there. And one other point of note, I thought this was interesting. They didn't cite in this week's report what the other 2.7% were, but in the state of Michigan, Delta is still predominant to a dramatic level. So not seeing anything else on that horizon just yet. So that's the COVID news in the state of Michigan. We will pause just briefly there in case anyone has any questions, comments, things you'd like us to look into. We're touching on this every week. We're creating a really cool record of what has happened in the state of Michigan over the course of this pandemic to look back on. We do continue to try to look at the effectiveness of the vaccines. We looked a little bit at that last week. But if there's anything that you're thinking of and you're sort of like, hey, I think this matters, we'd love to hear from you too. We'll give it just a second in case there are any questions or thoughts or something that you'd like to share there. And not seeing that, I'm going to stop that share as we move to the next part of our program today. And that, I want to welcome our guest, Ben Ernst. He's with Ann Arbor Spark. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Hi, Gene. Thanks. Hi, everyone.
It's great to have you.
Great to be here.
Ben runs a program that we're going to hear about today called Michigan STEM Forward. And Ben, I guess before we go into the program, we would just love to know a little bit about yourself and how you came to be in this position and why it matters to you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I'm a native Michigander. I grew up in Howell, but I spent quite a bit of time in Ann Arbor. Actually, getting a German degree, which doesn't seem like it would lead very, very linearly to this sort of job. But I actually spent some time working in Austria and teaching, and it was amazing. And I knew that I wanted to work in the higher ed sort of space. So I came back to U of M and got a higher ed degree. And I've been working with students, advocating for student opportunities since then. So the program that I'm in charge of is the MI STEM Forward and Michigan STEM Forward program, and it's really cool for me personally because it sort of crosses between advocating for student opportunity, but also sort of advocating for the general community of Michigan and for STEM companies, and sort of bringing together all these sort of different constituencies who are all really looking for each other, and so it's really exciting. It's brand new, so there's a lot of building going on, but it really appealed to me in that way, and it's been a blast so far.
That's really awesome. So when I hear STEM, my mind immediately goes to, high schoolers, or we got to get kids interested in science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm instantly thinking of, I don't know, Pinewood Derby cars and chemistry sets and stuff. And it's kind of unfortunate because as you and I have talked, and I started to learn more about what this program has to do, this isn't just an interesting thing having to do with, let's go educate some high schoolers or something like that. In fact, we talk a lot about the employment problem right now, that it's really hard to get people to want to take jobs. But at the same time, we've got a whole bunch of people in post-secondary education who are looking out on this job market. They don't even know how to get in touch with people. I mean, I know we used to do tons of internships, and then as COVID hit, it was like, oh goodness, how are we, if no one's even in the office, how are we going to help this person do something? And of course, that's all changing now, and things are getting back. But it strikes me we're looking at a whole bunch of people in post-secondary ed who are kind of looking out on the jobs, going, what do I do? Tell us more about this kind of person and this demographic.
Yeah, actually, so you're hitting on exactly like sort of the central reason why the MEDC and the state are interested in investing in this sort of a program, right? I don't think it would be controversial at all to say that we have a problem, I think, in the state of losing a lot of the folks that you were talking about, these highly educated, highly motivated students who are in the STEM fields, and they graduate and they leave. I have not been able to find like actual numbers about that, but I think anecdotally, talking to any company that I've talked to in the last 5 months, that's definitely the case. And then anecdotally from my education background, absolutely is the case as well. So I think that there's sort of that's part of the problem, right? Is that those students are leaving, and why are they leaving? A big part of it is that they're not connecting during their undergrad time with high quality, impactful, engaging internship experiences. And then just I'll throw out here, because there's a reason why this program is sort of nestled in Ann Arbor Spark, and it kind of speaks to this question as well. Ann Arbor Spark has had a sort of a local internship matching program for a significant number of years, and they were able to show with data that based on each one of those interns that they placed over the years, that 84% of them were employed within the state of Michigan a year after the fact. So, and 84% is a huge hike up from what one would anticipate seeing. So I think that that's data that shows that these sorts of internships keep students here, and that's good for the students. That's good for companies in Michigan. It's good all the way around.
I remember back when I was in college, and I'm very thankful for the path that my career took, but it was in part thanks to certain people who reached out to me and said, hey, I want to give you an opportunity here in this way. And if I hadn't had that, I had my eyes on these career fairs and things like that, and you're walking through the aisles and you're seeing this national company that happens to have a person in Michigan for some reason, and oh yeah, I'm going to move to, I don't know, Virginia or something, And I remember just feeling that gap, that chasm, that if there hadn't been that personal connection where somebody reached
Yeah.
out and said, "Hey, will you come?" Um, it might have turned out very,
Hmm.
very differently.
Yeah.
So tell us, I guess, a little bit more about, and I've actually got some anecdotes I want to share with you too, just because
Yeah.
I think this is such an important program. But tell us a bit more about how this is coming to be. What are the motivating factors? So Spark had a
Mhm.
program, and you guys were seeing 84%
Right.
retention.
Yeah.
That is what you're saying is they were staying in jobs after the internships.
Yeah.
84% of
They
them.
were staying in the state of Michigan after their internships were completed. Hmm.
Okay, so that
Yeah.
the ability to stick around for that critical
Hmm.
time period
Hmm.
was enough to say, "Hey, there's opportunity here for me. I
Hmm.
can be here."
Yeah. Right.
That's huge.
Yeah. And just
So,
keeping them here, right? I mean, compared to, and again, not anecdotally, but like just especially for something like computer science or some of these like medical technologies, right? If taking them to Silicon Valley or taking them to, I think Atlanta is brought up often as a place where it's the draw is so strong that we need to combat that. And I think yeah, right. So that's part of what we're doing here.
so presumably then MEDC saw what you guys were doing and said, "Hey, this is kind of cool."
Yeah, right, exactly. So that's kind of the sort of the history of kind of what happened is they looked at what Ann Arbor Spark was doing and they said, "That's great. I think instead of working for 40 interns, placing 40 interns per summer, how about you go ahead and do 450 interns and spread that across the entire state instead of doing that more locally." So that's what we started in mid-May. So we've been hit the ground running for sure, but yeah, that's sort of historical order of events there. Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. And so the goal then is 450 students
Hmm.
per summer,
Per year.
per year.
Per year.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow. Is that and I know you got some slides too, so feel free to bring those
Yeah.
in whenever you think it's
Sure.
appropriate. But is that a rolling basis? Like, is that year round? Do you guys focus more on summer internships? How does that work?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of flexibility. We anticipate at least, so we haven't gone through a full year yet to sort of see what the numbers shake out as, but we're anticipating that probably about half of our internships would be during the summer, and then probably the other half split between the fall and winter semesters. But what's interesting actually is that sort of I think of the sort of the traditional mindset of what an internship is. And you think about it, it's just the summer, right? Or it's potentially sort of a co-educational thing during the semester. I'm having to shift my own sort of ideas of what an internship, or at least what the length of time and when they happen is, because we've had a lot of folks who are able to work remotely now. There's a lot of positions that have been able to shift to that. So some of our interns are doing that kind of work, and when that happens, opens up a whole world of possibilities of working, part time throughout the semester and working, extending a summer internship into the fall when. So yeah, it's a lot more flexible, and I think even our ideas of what a traditional internship is having to flex as well. And so
Yeah,
maybe
that makes
actually
a lot
I
of
I,
sense.
I might pull up might share my screen and kind of share my slides. Just maybe it might be good to flesh out sort of what the details are, like the nitty gritty of what we're doing and the steps and all that kind of stuff, just to give some sort of context here. So let me see if I can make this work. All right. And it's only 4 slides, so I won't like bore everyone and just read like a small novel off the screen at you.
I mean, if it's a
Right.
good novel, we don't object,
Well, yeah, it
yeah.
depends on the novel, I suppose. All right, cool. So here's I'm going to talk firstly just maybe specific details about like what is this program and like what does it do and like the numbers and the dollar signs and all that. So it's an internship matching program. Like I've said already, I think it's serving the entire state of Michigan. In fact, we're chartered to intentionally seek out every corner of the state because I think it would be fairly easy for sort of the high what areas that you might expect to have high representation to sort of take over. But again, we're really focusing on spreading this, throughout Upper Sault Ste. Marie and Traverse City, Grand Rapids, all over the place. So there are 3 sort of incentives, speak, for companies to take part. The first is really easy to describe. It's a dollar for dollar match. And that's up to $6,000 for a full-time intern and $3,000 for a part-time intern. And that's the full amount of wages. 50% of that is what we would match, which would be $3,000 or $1,500. I'm kind of jumping to that little bubble underneath. So that's huge. And I think it's particularly important for small companies. Just anecdotally working with a lot of small companies this summer, it was there were a lot of companies who in their exit survey said, we would not have taken an intern this year had we not had some of that financial support. We weren't in a position financially to do that. Or there are companies who said, we usually traditionally took 2, but because of this, we were able to bump it up to 5. And so those kind of stories are pretty cool. The second part is administrative support. So one little cool aspect, and this is modeled after the way that Ann Arbor Sparks did their internship program before, is that we offer administrative support. In other words, the interns themselves are actually temporary W-2s of Ann Arbor Spark. So we do all of the onboarding paperwork. We do all of the payroll sorts of stuff. We do the timesheets are sent out and then gathered by us. So that can be incredibly helpful for companies who maybe, again, sort of smaller companies who maybe don't have an HR department, or, the idea of taking on that sort of administrative burden sort of, pushes them over the edge of saying, let's not do interns this year. So that's a really cool additional little piece of the program. And then the third thing is, and I think, Jean, you alluded to the fact that we have motivated, ready to work interns, or I think was some sort of phrase you used. And we do, and it's expansive as well. So we just went over 1,100 students who have proactively sought out our program to add their names and resumes and information to our pool. So that's available to any company that applies and wants to take part in the program. I will say that it is very data heavy, this talent pool. We collect a lot of information about the student, up to and including things like, where do they want to work, where they prefer to work, where they prefer to work in certain areas of the state, what fields are they looking to work in, what are their career ideas, what do they want to do career-wise, what their majors are and minors, and then we collect their resumes and all that stuff, of course, as well. And we give them an opportunity also to sort of have them stand out. So, like, for example, if a student has a significant amount of coding experience and puts in their software coding, the languages that they're competent in, companies who are looking for that can search the database and boom, pull up C++, anyone who mentions that. And it can be a fast way to really identify students quickly. All right.
Now,
I said I was not going to talk about it. Right. Go ahead.
No, this is great, but I think it does bring up a question, and I think people may be wondering, are folks only eligible from the pool that you've already selected, or if they have somebody in mind, can they bring them?
No, so any student who is currently enrolled in or within 12 months of having graduated from a Michigan college or university or higher ed institution, I think is in the contract language, is eligible. So thank you, Jean. That's an excellent question, because it does, in particular this summer, as we were starting sort of late, there were a lot of companies who hadn't out and said, but could we do the program still? And absolutely. Absolutely. We just asked that student to fill out our quick online application. It should take them 5 minutes so that they're in our database, and then we hit the ground running for sure. Great.
That's great.
And this actually goes to your other question, Jean. The third box down is that they're year round, and like I said, there's no limitations really on the time of year to start or ending time. There's also no limitations on company size or industry. Although I will say that I think our goal is to really be trying to serve smaller companies or startups. It seems like a more natural fit, and our benefits really impact in a bigger way in a smaller company. But the one thing, and this is bolded on here, is that it's in our name. It needs to be a STEM-oriented internship, so science, technology, engineering, or math. Right, and I think I already touched on that bottom one. And then this is, I think, my second slide. I just like to talk about, for me, context is important, or like, what's the point? Why do this? Why invest in such a way? And the top thing is what we talked about significantly. So I'm just going to sort of skip over, but it really is keeping the folks here, making sure that they find meaningful work. Or STEM college graduates is hugely beneficial to the entire ecosystem here in Michigan. It's also, of course, important to us in the MEDC in the state that we help companies that are starting out to take interns who otherwise wouldn't have been able to, or take more. But the third thing I haven't really talked about, and then I'll stop, and then I see a little number one in the question and answer, and I'll click on that. But I think there's also a strong push to help to sort of connect the various constituents in this ecosystem. So develop stronger partnerships and connections, not only between students and companies in their areas, but also companies and universities and colleges. But then also, importantly, to develop a stronger sort of buy-in from, or a stronger connection between those two constituents and their local economic development organization or smart zone. And if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to talk about it, what I know. But that's really important, I think, and all of the resources that those organizations can bring to bear for local companies and for students as well by way of internships, it's huge. And I think there's a strong desire to strengthen those connections. So, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, we do have a question here from
great.
Ken.
Thanks.
He says, are MBA students eligible if they have a STEM undergraduate degree?
Yeah. Oh, so this is a fantastic question. And I don't know if I probably didn't talk about this enough, but as someone, I think I said I had a German degree, right? I am happy to see that there's that it's not limited to folks who are pursuing a STEM degree. In fact, we have a significant number of students in our portal who don't have what would be traditionally thought of as a science, technology, engineering, or math degree, but have expressed a significant amount of interest or have personal experience doing things that would be STEM oriented. So I like to kind of bring that up and talk to companies, because I think students with that kind of flexibility or that kind of broader sort of range of interests and expertise can sometimes bring a really unique and really valuable point of view to a company. So all that to say, to answer your question more directly, maybe, is a student is, as long as they're enrolled in a college university in the state of Michigan or within 12 months of having graduated, they are eligible to take part in our program.
That's pretty cool. So that really creates
absolutely
creates a lot of options. No,
Yeah.
that's really cool. Yeah, and thanks, Ken, for that question.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is, can you go back, Ben, to the? Oh,
Yeah.
you were going to just tell us about what we've got here on this slide before we go back
Oh,
to the
okay.
other slide.
I was going to leave it on the slide anyway, because I think I leave it at this slide just to kind of talk. If you are interested, either from a company perspective, say, hey, maybe we want to look around and see if we can get some interns to this program, simply go to that link there. We made it as easy as I think as possible, hopefully. There's two buttons. There's a interested company button, and there's an interested student button, and both will take you to an application to start the process of being involved. And then also my contact info is there as well, and I'm absolutely happy to connect with anyone if they have more questions or want to speak about taking next steps. Happy to do so. You want me to go back, Gene, real quick? Or?
Yeah, if you go back to, I think it was your second slide that had some of the data on that. We're actually getting a little bit of audio breakdown, so I'm wondering if we may end up having you shut your screen sharing down here in just a second, because it seemed to be better before, but we'll leave this up for just a second. And of course, we don't have an agreement. You guys haven't paid us to say this, but on MedTech Crossroads, we always like to boost things that we see how they fit into the ecosystem, right? And that's how we've been boosted at Into Being, is through people going, hey, I see a connection here, you should go talk about it. So it's the kind of thing we like doing on the show, is just pointing out places where it's like, oh, historically we see why this is a cool thing. And I guess a little anecdote I wanted to share is, some number of years ago, we were looking for a particular role. Now we were ready to hire full-time at that point, but we were ready to do it like straight out of college. And there was a program at the time in the state. It was specifically focused on coding, actually, people who are programmers.
Yeah.
And nevertheless, it was really, really cool, because it basically dramatically reduced the risk of that first year that we had with this person, who's still on our team today. And it was really, really cool. So I mean, number one, we'll be knocking on your door in the future. But I thought it was kind of interesting here, because you're not specifying that it has to be a engineering student, for example, or a coder or
Mm-hmm.
anything in particular. Who it is
Right.
can be just about anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also noticing that within 12 months of graduating from,
Yeah.
so in fact, it sounds like the very experience that we had with a program that was designed for graduates for full-time positions, it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like you're actually enabling something very much like that. I'm imagining a scenario for those of our listeners who are representing early stage startups, and you're sitting there thinking, oh, I'm getting close to that funding round. I'm at a point where I think I might be able to get some investors here in the near future, but I've got work I've got to do, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily have all this funding. I think I'm hearing right from you that if I give someone a full-time internship, it might cost me 3 grand out of pocket, and that
Mm-hmm.
person could be a fully graduated, ready to enter the workforce person, which if
Yep.
they're willing to take that risk and the startup's willing to take that risks, you're funneling them right into that opportunity in a
Yeah.
way that's boosting for the startup and that's boosting for this person who wants to take a risk. They're interested in startups. Maybe they can't afford to just jump and take a completely speculative risk on it. But at the end of the day, they're
Mm-hmm.
going to have an internship on their resume. So either way,
Mm-hmm.
they've got something to show for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I had two thoughts. Hopefully, I can remember them too while I'm talking about them. But
Sorry, I went on for a while there. That was
no,
my
no,
that was my, my
that's a perfect anecdote. Because yes, so firstly, right, I would love for these internships to be spread among many different students at many different levels of their careers, and to sort of spread the opportunity in a very broad way. But what you said, I think, makes perfect sense to me. That if that a company could really, utilize this in a real way to, I mean, I hate using the term sort of extended interview, but I've heard that from a lot of folks that they really are thinking of their internships as a way of really identifying talent in a way more effective way than just in a series of interviews or something, but to actually get them to have hands-on experience and to see them as part of the team. So your story, Gene, about like potentially taking an intern and then being able to potentially segue them into full-time employment and taking them after they graduate. I have also anecdotally talked with companies who are thinking of this as a way of let's grab 10 or 5 or however many interns with the idea that we're going to have them for a summer, and then at the end of that time we will have, and we're maybe going to have 2 full-time positions, we can then have that be an extended interview where we know we can basically have a ton of potential really great options at the end of the summer.
So
So
use it as
yeah,
an extended
absolutely.
interviewing process. Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's really cool. And that's something that a company could do the year of or the year before, depending on what they thought their downstream needs were, if they were getting ready to grow for some need.
And actually, that word you used was actually part of what I also harp about. As you said, downstream, and I think of this very much as an investment, because it's an investment that will reap benefits months and years potentially down the road as a company sort of strengthens its early stage talent identification. But it is something that has a return on investment, for sure. But it's a more longer term down the road thing. Well,
That's
it's
really
immediate
cool.
too, right? But yeah,
You're getting
but in a
something
big way.
for it. Now, of course, I think a lot of companies, when they think about interns, and maybe this is part of the reason that my mind goes to the focus on the later stage, but not to detract from the earlier years of education.
Mm,
Um, a lot of times people will say, "Oh, I'm not interested in interns because they just take a lot of time to train, and then I can't get a lot out of them. I'm ready to hire somebody." Tell us just a little bit about that, because I think and I guess you guys are early in the program too, so this may
yeah,
work out in time, but tell us a little bit about that kind of objection. It's
yeah,
one of the few objections that I can imagine.
yeah. And actually, I love that objection. I think that's a fantastic objection because, again, our going forward is our first goal on the top of the screen here is to have them have meaningful work. And so when a company sort of objects and says, it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of management, and it's not like hiring a full-time employee where, it's a different sort of experience. It's a little more hands-on, right? So if a company balks at that, it means that to me, it means that they're taking it very seriously, and they're really underlining that word on the top there, which is meaningful, which is where all of our success is going to be, is how impactful, how engaged are these students going to be. So I actually really like hearing that from companies. But I think that's where I talk about the fact that it is an investment. Absolutely, no question about it. It is going to be work. You will get a lot out of it, but in the end, it does take some work. But in the end, what you get out of it, the return on investment is huge, in a company specific way, but in a broader ecosystem way, in a Michigan wide sort of way. So I'll say all those things, and then so we don't have data yet as far as our internships, because they've just concluded in the last month and a half or so. I think was when our first interns sort of ended their first stints as interns. But we have collected, though, our exit interviews. So we've done exit sort of surveys with all of the interns who've finished their roles, and then also on the managing side as well. And the numbers for that, I can say, I think it was about 2/3 of the managers, when we asked them, would you consider, or have you offered this intern a continuing role with your company? And that was about 2/3. And the other ones, it was dictated more by circumstance than by, oh, this was such a terrible experience. Just judging by the fact that we mostly get 10s out of 10s as far as what the experience was like. Was it impactful and good? So anyway, all that to say, I think it is an investment, but I think judging by the numbers we see just already from the company side, it's a worthwhile one.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I even think to the investor relations that startups have to go through as they're working with their investors, and investors are becoming much more savvy in the MedTech space, for example, and they're starting to understand that not everything just happens. You don't just shoot on goal once and then everything's beautiful and it happens. Nor do you want to just shoot on goal once and let it all fail. You have to understand that there are these trajectories, there are these partnerships that have to be created, there's these documents that have to be created, there's this whole thing that has to be grown, and you want to know that you're close enough to the goal to make it. And it's interesting because what you're sort of providing is a way, from the workforce perspective, if a company is seeing a need coming down the road, that can be speculative, that can be target, that can be the thing that they're looking and saying to our investors, here's what we want to get. And a savvy investor would say, okay, where are the people to do that going to come from? Where are you going to get those people? And if a company were saying, well, yeah, but you know what? We had these 5 interns this last summer, and 2 of them are interested in continuing as we do this growth that we're thinking of. The question of where you're going to get those people is actually something that you can help to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think a huge part about that is just the practical response of, and they're already trained, and we've already identified the fact that they're good fits. We've already had that advantage. Yeah, and I think it's an intentionality thing. It's a planning. It's a having a roadmap for growth.
That's really cool. Our friend Ken Spencer's on the line here. I'm going to give him let his audio go on here. He's got his hand up. So Ken, what do you got for us today?
Yeah, so this is quite interesting. In the second company that I had in Ann Arbor, software company there, we engaged with Kettering University there, and we had such a great experience there because we had a heel to toe kind of thing. In other words, we had 5 positions open there, and we had 5 Kettering students there for half the year, and then there was another 5 for the second half of the year, and so we were able to create like real work, if you will. In other words, they were really part of everything we were doing, whether it was coding, QA, inspection, whatever. And it was such a great experience because I'm going to call them kids because everybody's a kid to me. But they wanted to turn over to their, incoming replacement, if you will, really good documentation and everything else out there, So I hope that something like that can be done, because I found that to be much more rewarding than in my first company where we had summer interns, and sometimes we didn't have, I'm going to say, we didn't have projects that fit within that time frame, you know, because Gene knows, I mean, software never goes the way you plan it to go. So, you know, we didn't quite have maybe something that was as rewarding to them, whereas that kind of program that we had with Kettering was phenomenal for us and phenomenal for those people. I mean, we literally hired people from Kettering, you know, as soon as they graduated because they were already working for us, you know, kind of thing, right?
So you saw, Ken, you saw that kind of, I don't want to use the word turnover. You saw that kind of conversion from those internships into those jobs.
Absolutely. Yep.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, and what you were just saying, Ken, also reminded me too of this question of which part of the year. Thank you, Ken, for the question. We appreciate it as always.
Yeah, thanks, Ken.
The question that's coming to my mind, Ben, and I think Ken's point makes it clear that oftentimes this quote unquote summer internship may or may not be the best thing for the company or for the person, like you said, remote working really enables a different way of thinking about it. Do you guys have a time bound on these internships, or how flexible is the time period over which this can be executed? You're talking about these $6,000 full-time, $3,000 part-time internships. What's the breakdown of time that you're seeing?
So we traditionally think of them as 10 to 12 weeks, and it's actually in our contract language that's sort of the standard, I guess. But we're not tied to that as far as everything has to be 10 to 12 weeks. I think the real limiting factor is that cap that of 6,000 or 3,000, and depending on the rate of pay, you know, that a lot of times will dictate length of the internship experience. But I would say actually what's happened really frequently is that the internship, as far as our matching portion ends, and we can no longer match, that intern will be swapped to the company's payroll and will just continue going. So for the intern side, their experience is not changing, except that their paycheck comes from a different, you know, it has a different name on it. But yeah, actually. But the point that was made, that I think it was Ken made, is fantastic. Like that's the meaningful part on this that I keep going back to, and I know it's obnoxious, but you mentioned that when they were doing actual work, and I think that was what you said, they were actually contributing, they were actually doing valuable, real work, right? That's what they were really proud of, and that's what connected them. And that's just from an educational perspective, that's absolutely the best case scenario as far as learning outcomes for the student, is then they get engaged, and that's what we're looking for, and that's what will keep them. And that's what, you know, that's the folks that will be, you know, eminently hireable at the conclusion of their interns, are the ones who really dig in. So
Yeah.
absolutely identify with that. And then the last thing, gosh, I'm sorry. I just like talk all the time, but there's also I think a shift. Like I said, we're sort of changing the way we think of traditional internships. And we talked about that, you know, summer may not be the right fit, or the 10 to 12 week may not be the right fit. I think there's a lot of colleges and universities that are rethinking even their degree programming and what's in that, and how frequently does that include an apprenticeship, internship, sort of on the job training portion. I don't have numbers with me right now, but I would bet a lot of money that the rate at which degree programs include that kind of experience is increasing dramatically, and it has probably increased dramatically over the last 5 years, and will continue to. And frankly, I think that's awesome, and I think that we're really well positioned to facilitate that.
Yeah, it seems like a phenomenal thing. I don't know if we get out there and pitch for our guests on the show, but having been through a program like this with somebody who's still with our team today, I know how powerful it can be. So I think it's really cool, and just trying to talk through all these options as to, like you said, if a larger company that knows they have hiring needs, they might take 5 or 10. Ken just described a situation like that where a mature startup was taking 10, it sounded like, interns on over the course of a year. And maybe the small startup can only take 1 or maybe 2. Still, you're giving those people a valuable exposure that's going to be there on their resume forever.
Yeah.
and you might be getting some good work done that's leading to that person who can grow with you. And for a startup, knowing what that track looks like is really important. So I think
Yeah,
this is just really cool.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Ben, do you have any other anecdotes you want to share with us, or little experiences? I know you guys haven't gotten to your reporting period for the first sort of cohort through this, but are there any
Right.
other anecdotes you want to share with us before we
Oh
close
gosh,
today?
I think I've done a hopefully an okay job of like sharing my enthusiasm. I think the again, we don't have the data to show how many students we've retained after a year. We will next summer, and I am full of all kinds of anxieties, but I don't think I'm really full of much anxiety about that, because the early returns from our exit in surveys with the students and with the companies, I really have a strong sense that we're really going to show some serious impact. Like, gosh, let me think if there's any more. We're on Tuesday, we're heading to Dearborn to make a promotional video already, where we have one of our interns from the summer who's been hired full time by a
Awesome.
company making charging facility equipment in Dearborn. So and we could do that all over the place. At Wacker Chemicals in Adrian, we have the same thing already happening. So yeah, I hope I did a good job of sort of expressing my enthusiasm, and I'll maybe leave before we open up to questions. Just on a last note, I'll go back to this slide here. I'm happy to connect if you have questions or thoughts, or anything like that, if I can help. If you want to connect me to anyone, if you want me to try to twist someone's arm to say, hey, you should do this, I'm totally willing to do that anytime. Just shoot me an email. My email's right on the bottom there, or head
Here,
to our
take some free
website
money.
there. Yeah, really. I want to give it out.
Well, that's cool.
It's my
Well, we'll
job to give
certainly,
it out.
Into Being will certainly be coming knocking on your door, because we
Awesome.
just think this is a great program, and I just found out about it recently, so we're glad that you guys are doing it. Yeah, let's open it up and see if there are any questions still on the line. Feel free to raise your hand or type it into the Q&A box for Ben. We'd love to hear from you if there's any live questions here. And if there's not, but you do get what this is all about, and you're either mentoring a startup or you're talking to somebody in school and post-secondary education, let them know about this opportunity, because it sounds like Ben, you can bring this opportunity either way. Yes, you have a pool, you've been collecting data, but if a student hears about this and wants to propose it in one direction, or a company hears about it
Absolutely.
and wants to propose it in another direction, that's
Yep.
all
Yep.
fair game. No, that's amazing. Well, I'm not seeing any questions on the line right now, but we appreciated the ones earlier. And Ben, I really appreciate your being here today
Oh,
and telling
yeah,
us
my
about this. I
pleasure.
think you did communicate your enthusiasm. We're
Oh, good.
glad to see somebody there who is enthusiastic about it and understands what the needs from both sides are and can talk about them. And hopefully your program will get heavily utilized and keep a lot of people in the state and boost the startups and tech companies in the state.
I think we will. I think we will.
Sounds like it. Ben
All right.
Ernst, Ann Arbor Spark, thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks, Gene.
Well, that's great. I'm thankful to Ben for being here, and I'm thankful to all of you for being here too. Another great show today. I am looking forward to next week with you all. As we always do, we want to take just a minute and give a chance to check in. If there's anything that you know is happening in the community, events, things that need to be talked about, one of them I want to make you aware of, and I'm sorry I don't have the slide for it. I should have had this prepped. I can probably bring one up here really quick. That is the MedHealth Matchmaking Mixer. That is coming up in the near future here. Let's just bring that up really quick. I'm sorry for the slowness here. That is coming up next week. And actually, Into Being is a sponsor of the MedHealth Matchmaking Mixer. So we hope that you'll come. It's like Ben said, it's all about putting people together and boosting the community that's there, boosting that ecosystem. October 21st and 22nd. Here's the agenda for the Matchmaking Mixer. There's going to be a keynote by Jeff Bennett of Higgy, and a whole bunch of chances to connect with people. So I hope that you will join for that. We have another comment Ben says, I'll be at this event with the booth. Feel free to stop by and say hi. Thanks, Ben. That's awesome. That's great. So we'll look forward to seeing Ben there. A lot of folks there. There aren't a lot of opportunities for the community to get together as we're still trying to navigate COVID. So we hope that you will come and be part of that. There's Into Being as a sponsor, Beaumont, the keynote sponsor, WeTech Alliance, and many others here as well. So hope that you'll come be part of the matchmaking mixer, and that is next week, 21st and 22nd. So with that, we'll just take a look here, see if we have any other hands raised, any other announcements. We hope to see you next Thursday and Friday at the Matchmaking Mixer. We'll see you next Friday at MedTech Crossroads. Thanks for being with us today. It's always a pleasure. Talk to you next week.